Freemasonry has a long history in the city of Grand Rapids, over 163 years. For the first 60 plus years, the Masons met in various locations around the city of Grand Rapids in rented halls and in different buildings, including the third floor of the Grand Rapids Police Department. In 1895, the Masons decided they needed to have a building where all the Masonic organizations could meet. And a Masonic brother, Colonel E. Crofton Fox, was erecting a building at the corner of Ionia and Ottawa streets. They dedicated the top 4 floors of that building to Masonic use. But by 1915, the Masonic craft had outgrown that building, and they built a new building at the corner of East Fulton Street and Lafayette Avenue, which is the current Grand Rapids Masonic Temple. As part of the 100th anniversary of the Grand Rapids Masonic Temple building, we are doing a series of interviews of people who are important to this building and to Masonry in Grand Rapids. A gentleman who has been very important to the part of the history of Masonry in Grand Rapids is Tom Vankampen, the building manager here for almost 40 years at the Grand Rapids Masonic Center, as it's now called, at the corner of East Fulton and Lafayette, a building that most people have driven by many, many times and never really known what it was. Tom, we're glad to have you here today and talk a little bit about your history with the temple. Tom, I know your family has a long Masonic history. Could you tell us about it?
Yes, Mike, that's true. My family has started in Doric Lodge here back in the 1880s with my great-grandfather, a couple of great-uncles in Doric Lodge coming over from Germany. Also have my grandfather, who was a Malta member, which is now part of Doric Lodge. They've merged, and my father is a Doric member, and I'm a Doric member. So I'm actually a 4th-generation Mason in this building.
Fantastic.
In Masonry in Grand Rapids.
Why did you become a Mason, Tom?
Well, I got a job working here, and my dad joined just after I did. He was the link that didn't follow. My grandfather always wanted me to be a member, and when I started working here, it was obvious. I started so young that I couldn't be a Mason yet. I was only 18 when I started here, and when I became 21, I joined the lodge. And a very dear friend of my grandfather, his name was Ed Reed, presented me with my apron, which was very meaningful to me and to our family. So that's why I joined. So.
How many years did you work here before you became building manager?
I started working here in May of 1973, and that's kind of an interesting story. At the time, my father was a contractor for DeYoung and Baggin, which is one of the larger construction companies of the era in Grand Rapids. They were building the parking garage that we have out here, and my dad was a superintendent on the job. And at that time, we had a restaurant in the basement, Ben's little restaurant downstairs, and he would go down there for lunch or break while he was working, and they had a sign on the bulletin board. They were looking for a maintenance man. And I was working as an electrician, 2nd shift, and not particularly happy with the idea because I had to travel a lot, and I was in Lansing for a week and in Grand Haven for a week and a lot of driving, and it was starting to take its toll. And they had this job as a maintenance man, and my dad said, you ought to apply for that. And benefits, and the benefits was the reason that I took it. And that's how I got the job, started working here, and I was a maintenance man in the building, and that was in 1973. Now, I didn't become manager until maybe 1979 or so, maybe 78. It's kind of an interesting story. But what had happened was I was a maintenance man and electrician, 2nd shift, so I was working 2 jobs full, 2 40-hour-a-week jobs, and I did that for 2 more years. My dad, being a tradesman all his life, insisted that I get my journeyman's card, so I completed that and did become a licensed electrician, but I continued to work here. I liked the job. It was very interesting, very diverse, lots of things to do. We did a lot of remodeling jobs back then, being that my dad was a contractor. When I was growing up, I was working with a hammer since I was 10, rebuilding houses, putting roofs on. We built some cottages, a lot of renovation jobs. So that was my forte, was to work in the trades. And while I worked here, the first 3 years, they went through 3 building managers. And it was kind of alarming that, my God, they go through a different building manager every couple of years. And what had happened here was one of the building managers had a heart attack and died, and another one was discharged, and then one retired or resigned. And Hugo McCrath, who was the president of the board at the time and later became chairman of the House Committee, was kind of calling the shots back then, and they discharged the building manager at a board meeting. And Hugo came to me the next morning and said, "Tom, we'd like you to try the job as building manager. Are you interested in it?" And I said, "No, I'm not really interested in it. I like being a maintenance man, and frankly, you guys have gone through 3 in the last 3 years. I don't look for the security of that job right now." I was contemplating getting married, and at the time it didn't seem right. And he said, "Well, go home over the weekend and think about it, and then let me know on Monday." Well, I talked it over with my fiance, now my wife of 37 years. I came back on Monday and said, "I'm not interested in it. But you hire a building manager and I'll work with them any way I can." And he said, "Well, let me get this straight now. What you want to do is have me hire somebody to pay him more than what you're making, and then you teach him how to do the job." And I went, "Yeah, I guess so." And I went to the workshop and started working. And about 15 minutes later, he calls me on a little intercom system that we had, and he says, "Vankampen, move your stuff up to the office. You're the new billing manager." And I went up to the office and I says, "Don't I have a choice in this?" And he kind of laughed and said, "You always have a choice." I said, "Okay, let's go." So we did it. And here I am, still at it. So it's changed a lot over the years, and that's what's been interesting. But
What were some of the challenges you faced when you first became building manager?
well, when I first became building manager, the building was just a Masonic Center. We didn't have any outside tenants in here. It was just Masonic activities. Saladin Shrine had just moved out, and that's what actually started the demise of our ability to pay the expenses of the building. Not that the shrine left, but we had a decreasing membership. So over the next 3 or 4 years, from the late 70s to the early 80s, we were soul searching, trying to find a way to say, how can we keep this home that's ours, and how can we pay for it? At the time, the budget was $250,000 a year to run the building, and every penny of that came from the Masonic fraternity. And we had a declining membership history, and there was no future aspect that looked like that was going to change. So what we did is we came up with a plan that would try to change that and transfer the cost of running the building from that declining membership base to some sort of commercial tenant. Now, I didn't have any experience in the real estate end of it, but we had an MTA that was very progressive at the time, headed by George Savage, who was a local architect. And I convinced George through the process of badgering him until he finally got to the point and said, "You know what, we've got a building here that could be used." Well, that's all it took for George to hear that, and then he sat down drawing designs as to how we could design the building so that we could get commercial tenants in here. And from there, we evolved into what we are today.
There was a lot of controversy in that late 1980s over making that switch, wasn't there?
It was a very, very controversial topic. We had emotions that were trying to run the economics of the building, and that's a dangerous scenario to have. The actual vote to renovate the building was a 5-5 tie, and George Savage, who was president of the MTA, voted to break the tie, so it was 6-5. That's a very controversial vote. What we were doing was taking the entire building and all of its contents and risking that on a venture to go out and borrow $1.5 million in cash to renovate 3 floors of the building. Now, these 3 floors were going to produce part of the money needed to run the building. It was kind of a 3-legged stool approach, where 1/3 of the cost was going to come from the commercial aspects of the building, 1/3 was going to come from the membership assessments, and 1/3 was going to come from an endowment fund that we were going to create. Well, as it was at the time, the endowment fund never developed. It ended up, today we still have $150,000 or give or take in it. It was to produce 1/3 of the cost, which means we would need to have that at $3 million today. The assessment at the time was $240,000 a year. That's what the Masons paid as a group to be in the building, $240,000. Remember that number, it's very important, because that was in 1984. We were paying $250,000 as members to be in the building. Today, the 2013 budget that we just came across with, the Masons, through assessment, are going to pay 8%. About $60,000 this year will come from the membership to run the building. $240,000 30 years ago, $60,000 today. The reason that's available, the reason that works, is because the occupied spaces in the building, of the Masonic areas that we converted, will generate $600,000 in income through our commercial tenants. The endowment fund is still lagging. It is still there, but it only probably represents 1 or 2%. So it did work. It was a very controversial topic to make the change, because after all, we weren't just going out and borrowing money. We risked the building and all of its contents as collateral on that note. So it was an all or nothing proposition. So we went ahead and did it, and you know, people criticized it at the time, but I think over the last 30 years we have seen the benefits of it.
Tom, what's been the result of the Masonic fraternity of the conversion?
Well, at the time before the conversion, as I said, the total cost for them was a burden on them. And today there wouldn't be any organizations left in the building. We would have lost the building. It was a single-use building, not air-conditioned, designed specifically for us as Masons. We would have lost the building in 1985 had we not done it, and we'd have gone by the route of the rest of the Masonic facilities around Michigan and several states. You see it every day, another Masonic centers being sold or razzed, and the Masons end up in a small facility that they still can't afford. So it's a syndrome that you just keep reducing. And in our case, what we did is we transferred the burden of running this building to a commercial use, transferred it from a declining membership. Not to mention our assessment drops, we've also put several $million into the building in improvements, even to the Masonic areas, at the expense of the commercial tenants. So as we did last year, we did several projects, improvement projects, the 4th floor dining rooms, the AV systems that went in there. All of those things were done through the income generated from the commercial aspects. It's been a great marriage for the building, because we utilize the building in the evening and on weekends, and the office tenants use it during the day. So it's a win-win. It's worked out very well.
I know you've been very successful in your tenant retention. And what percentage of our tenants have been with us on a regular basis?
We have a few tenants that have been here since day one, since 1985, and that's remarkable. But we have averaged somewhere around 97% occupancy for the entire, since 1985. And the downtown market generally runs in the 80 percentile for occupancy, maybe a little less right now. Last couple of years, commercial real estate has been down, but we've always maintained above 96% occupied. And several years, we were 100% occupied the whole year. So we have a very diverse base of tenants that range from 300 square foot to 6,000 square foot. And part of the reason that we have is because of the diversity that we have in space.
Tom, what do you attribute that very high number?
Well, you know, when you're looking at office space downtown Grand Rapids or any place else, you know, you always have the three things in real estate: location, location, location. We don't have the location to be rated number one when it comes to location. We are not within walking distance of the government center where attorneys could be here and walk to the courts. We're on the outskirts. We're in a very good, safe environment. The Heritage Hill District is a wonderful place to be. It's downtown, yet not in the congestion of downtown. So location is adequate and nice, but not prime. The other aspect of office space is parking, and we do have good parking. We have parking on site that takes care of all of our office tenants and our Masonic needs, and that's a big plus. The other aspect of it is service, the services that go along with the office space. You can get office space anywhere, and I've said this to every tenant that I've ever talked to, every prospect. You can get office space anywhere. What you can't get are the services that go along with it in a consistent manner. So with those three things, the parking, the location, and the services, we create a pretty good value to our tenants, and that's what has kept us in that high occupancy level.
Tom, how's the building divided up between our tenants and the Masonic organizations?
Well, we're about 90,000 square foot of building total. That's the rentable square footage of the building. 42,000 square foot is office use, commercial use, and the rest are Masonic areas. Now, it's a little larger in the actual space of the commercial space because I'm only adding in we rent on the usable square foot method, so we're not taking into consideration the lobbies, hallways, and those kind of things. But it's pretty much 50-50. With 90,000 square foot, we're at about 45 probably if you took all of the tenant areas.
You've assembled a great staff here at the Masonic Temple. How important are they to the success?
Well, they're the best thing you can have is a good staff, and I have an excellent staff. They're hand-picked, hand-trained, and every one of them it comes with the attitude that is necessary to be a service industry. You can fix somebody that doesn't have the skills, but you can never change an attitude. And my people, right from the dishwashers right to the top, are all service-minded people. We excel in the services to our tenants. When a tenant looks at our building over other buildings, value is important, but the services, once they get in the building, they find the services here are excellent. We don't use subcontractors unless we absolutely have to. So my cleaning crew are our people, they're our staff, and they're in-house, they're regular, they're consistent, and they do a good job. That falls into a very small category when it comes to cleaning contractors. From this standpoint, a tenant in our building, some of them have lots of medical records, some of them have Social Security records for all their employees, the security of the space is very important. When you're using cleaning contractors, there will be a group of people that will come in at night and clean, and it may be a different group next week and a different group the next. I use a little different theory. I have one housekeeper. I don't care how big the suite is. It's just one housekeeper, one key, one person. If that person is not there, I have a sub, one of our other constant employees that has one key. So there's only one person in the office. She might be in there for 3 hours because it's a large office, or she might be in there 10 minutes if it's a small office. But each one is set up in routes. And then I have a standby person that subs for any vacancies if they're gone or vacations or what have you. And that is very important to the tenant security. You can leave a wallet sitting on the desk in here, and I have the same person cleaning every day that's part of our staff. It's a non-issue. Where there's a lot of buildings around where the computers are gone the next day. And that's very important to the tenants. And I have people on my maintenance crew that are set up. A tenant calls in the morning and says, I have a flat tire on one of my employees out in the parking lot. We go out, change the tire, put it all back together for them. I've even gone to the point with a tenant that had a breakdown in a car, drove them home. You know, these are services that you just don't get, but that's what we do. That's why when a tenant comes up for renewal here, it pays dividends. So that the personal service that we do every day to our tenants is what we excel at.
Tom, you talked about value added, and I know, as well as the stories of the tenants with the tire problems, I know you also are famous for your tenant holiday and summer parties and your famous homemade soups. Tell us how you came up with the idea of tenant appreciation events.
Well, when I started in the business, I knew very little about property management, so it was kind of a learn on the job. My dad was notorious for little sayings and little educational moments, and he said, you know, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to know what you're doing, find somebody that does and do what they do. And that's how it came about. And I always looked from day one when I started in the management business here, what's the best managed building in Grand Rapids? And I thought it was always the Waters building. I thought they did a wonderful job. They had a great team. They just did a real nice job for years and years. So I said, let's go see what they do and do like they do. Well, I belonged to an organization that had all the property managers in town, and the Cassards that owned the Waters building were members of it. And they were having a tenant appreciation dinner at the Penn Club for the tenants that have been in the building 20 years. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. That's something that we ought to look at. And then not only when you look at it and say, do what they do, let's do better than what they did. Now, anybody can pay the bill for a lunch, and that's nice and it's important. Let's go one step farther. Let's do the lunch for them. So we started out doing a Christmas lunch, not just for the principal in the office. Let's do it for the whole office. So we did a luncheon because our building has a lot of options that they don't at the Waters building. They don't have Masonic floors with dining rooms and kitchens available to them. So I said, let's do it in our dining rooms, and I'll have my staff do it, rather than have a catering company come in. It's kind of impersonal. It works, it's nice, but I didn't want to match what they were doing. I wanted to improve on what they were doing. So we do a lunch, and it's in December, and it's a Christmas lunch, and it's a buffet, and all of the tenants, all of their employees, and we even tell them if you have visitors in your office that day, bring them along to it. We have 150, 160 people, and it's 2 hours, so some of the offices can't close, so a group will come at 11 o'clock, another group will come at 12, and my staff, my housekeeping, my cleaners, we're the ones that serve and do the meal. And that's an important thing as well because it builds community. And the board of trustees are all invited there, and they sit down with the tenants and they mingle, and it's just a real nice thing. That's what started it out. We did that we've been doing it every year. But then, you know, you can't just leave it at that. It's like the World's Fair. It gets bigger and better every year. So later on, we decided let's do something in the summer. So we do a little picnic out in the parking lot. We've been doing that for 20 years as well. And the same scenario, all the tenants and all of their guests come in, and we give them little takeout boxes if they need to go back to the office. And then later on, we decided that we've got several tenants now that have been here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So we have a tenant appreciation day in March. We do that in the main lobby on the first floor. It's a morning brunch, sort of, where they can come in and take coffee, donuts, Danish, whatever. We have it there, and they take it on a tray up to their office, or they can mingle in the lobby. And that's a pretty successful thing, too. We do that in March. And along with the Tenant Appreciation Day, we send packets around to the tenants for 5-year anniversary. Maybe they get a floral arrangement or a tray from Ferris Nut or one of those places with chocolates and coffee deals for 10-year tenants, 20-year tenants, and so on. So we've continued those, and they are very successful. And every once in a while, you'll get a comment from a tenant that was here years ago, or an employee, and says, I remember the tenant lunches. You guys were so nice that you did that. Because we do things that not everybody else does. When your product is nice but not the top, you got to find another way to make the value. And the way that we make the value is services and those types of amenities. So that's part of the style that we've used, and it has served us very well.
I know my biggest decision at the parties is which soup I'm going to try first.
Yeah, some of those are my home recipes. Remember also that when the restaurant downstairs closed in the 80s, I continued to manage it for 6 or 7 years, and those were some of the soup recipes that we used in the restaurant downstairs, and it carried on as a tradition now. So we continue to do that, and then I print out a card afterwards if somebody asks for the recipe, which they do from time to time.
Tom, why did you want to become building manager?
Well, I really didn't want to become building manager. I was hired here as a maintenance man, and the way that came about is kind of comical. My father was working on the parking garage. He was the contractor, superintendent that was building the parking garage in 1973. He saw a sign in the restaurant downstairs when he was having lunch that said they were looking for a maintenance man. I was working as an electrician, second shift, and my dad says, you ought to apply for that. It'd be a nice job for you. So I came down and I applied for it, and I met with a man named Hugo McCrath, who was president of the board at the time, and he interviewed me, and he said, our boilers in the building have been shut down. They didn't pass the test that the state did on them, and this was in May, and he said, our boilers are shut down for the season. We need to get those boilers running by September. How familiar with boilers are you? And I said, well, I can fix anything. I grew up working with my dad as a contractor, building houses and renovations, remodeling. When I was 18 and they passed the law that you could own property, I bought some rental houses. So I was kind of a do-it-yourselfer, and I was an electrician when I started working here, but the plumbing aspects and those things all just came into play. And Hugo asked me if I could fix boilers and get those ready, and I said, sure. And they hired me, and the first day on the job, I come in, and Hugo says, no, let's go down and see about those boilers. And we walked down into the boiler room, and I said, so that's what a boiler looks like. And he looked at me kind of funny and said, you do know how to fix these, don't you? And I said, don't worry, I will. And he said, you've never worked on a boiler? And I went, I've never seen a boiler. And he kind of laughed and said, well, you're going to learn. And I went to school at night through the power engineers squad and learned boilers. Took that boiler apart piece by piece. And we passed the test in September and got it back online, and then I knew boilers. It's just simple mechanics. But I was kind of a crap shooter, kind of cocky at the time, and needed a job. And I didn't tell him I could fix boilers. I said I can fix anything. But it was kind of comical how that happened.
Tom, you mentioned you had to go to school to get that license. And I know you hold a lot of other licenses. What are some of them?
Well, I have a real estate license, which came about through the process here when we started going into the real estate business. I kind of backed into most of my education. When I graduated high school, I went to college, dropped out because I was bored, went to work as an electrician. Well, when I needed to know something about real estate, I went to real estate school and got my license, still carry a real estate license. I did complete my electrician, and I have a journeyman's card, state electrical license. I also carry a boiler's license now because I had to learn that. I also have an HVAC license, and I do not have a plumbing license, but actually the way I describe it is I have a roofer's license, and I work on everything under the roof. And that's kind of how it come about. I'm more of a mechanical person. When it got into the real estate end of it, and I got into management, well, I went back to college and I learned some human resource stuff for the personnel. psychology classes, real estate law classes, and ended up getting my degree as a real property administrator. So I kind of did it from the back, and it doesn't normally happen that way. You don't usually have the job until you have that. Well, I needed it when I got in the job, so it was a build as you go. And over the years, I've been going to school ever since, just about. I never stop. Every time something comes up I need, I go back and get it. So it's been interesting. But I wouldn't recommend that to my kids. You should actually do it the other way around.
I know you and I have talked a million stories that we could go on for hours with this, but what are a couple of the experiences that you've had here at the temple that really stick out in your mind that were significant to getting us to where we are today?
Well, I think the biggest thing was it became very obvious to me after working here for a few years, and when I was handed the job as a manager, my dad and my grandfather, who were members, both said to me, "Okay, so now you're the manager." And it kind of reminds me of Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You know, the responsibility that you have, you can't fathom. And I can remember my dad, my grandfather saying, "All right, you got it. Now don't screw it up. It's our building. It's your building. Make sure it's done right." And I've always kind of looked at it and said, my job was that we as Masons in Grand Rapids were given this gift from previous Masons. We were given this building. Now it's our job to improve it and pass it on to the next generation. That's what I would measure success by. Have you done that? When I get to that point and I'm confident with it, I can say that I completed it. We're not there yet, but we're close. We have made it available to them to have a plan and a roadmap of how to continue it. That's the important thing. So that's what my job was. So I think my dad and my grandfather would be happy.
I agree. Tom, what are some of the projects we have planned for the near future?
Well, we have a couple of things. Every year, as I said, we do continue to improve the building. Last year we did several projects, new doors on the 4th floor, the soundproof doors between the rooms, the AV systems that were put in up there on the 4th floor and the 6th floor. Those are both a benefit to the tenants and to us. We've got so many more options as to how we can entertain ourselves and how we can function as a building. We're not an antiquated old space now. We're state-of-the-art for AV systems in those rooms. In 2013, in our budget, we have a plan to do some air conditioning in the Masonic areas. This is probably a $75,000 project. We have $40,000 allocated this year. Whether that will get done depends on our occupancy level throughout the year. But if it does, we haven't decided yet whether that money will be spent on the 4th floor or the lodge rooms. That'll be a choice that the organizations will have to make. But we also have some improvements to the ballroom that are scheduled to be done this year as far as decorating, floor reconditioning, and probably some furniture changes. So we're always constantly doing those. And again, I can say that we're talking about $100,000 again worth of those sort of projects. We are not out of pocket from the Masonic organizations. This is money that will be generated through the commercial aspects of the building. And over the years, we have continued to do that because this is both their home and our home. And it's been a great marriage between the commercial ends and the tenants. I have very few things to say about the changing to commercial that have been adversely affected on the Masonic areas. It has been a great marriage between the two. So from that aspect, it has been very successful. And I think the tenants will probably echo that same thing. It's been a very good use because during the day they use the building, and the evenings and the weekends we use it. It's worked out very well.
This building gets a lot of use all day, as you say, as well as in the evening. And it's an interesting shift around 5, 6 o'clock to see the tenants leaving and the Masonic organizations come back in. And there's a good marriage there, I think.
Yes.
And it's been one that I know you have propagated and you have worked very hard at making sure it works well.
Yes, we have run at least 18, 20 hours a day, every day. And now with the security systems that we've installed in the buildings, we have tenants coming and going all hours of the night and on weekends, and it's a viable building all the time. It's not like most of the Masonic centers throughout the country. There are very few Masonic centers that have successfully transferred into a situation like we are. There's been several of them that have tried it, but we've been fortunate by some of the environmental issues, of where we are in the community, and Grand Rapids being an area in the state of Michigan that is still economically okay. We have a very diverse background in this state. In our building, we have a very diverse tenant base. We've got everything from healthcare to legal to insurance to lots of nonprofits. The nonprofits seem to use us a lot, probably because of the value and because of the accessibility to amenities in the building that most office buildings can't provide. My tenants our tenants rather, they have an availability of taking our dining rooms and our conference room and using those on a daily basis. And they can use them for out meetings, they can use them for seminars, training sessions, and do that all in-house. And they can incorporate a meal with it, a lunch or a brunch, and those kind of things you just don't see in a normal office building environment. Some of my tenants may use the dining rooms 6, 7, 8 times a month, and that's income to us, but it is also utilizing the building totally. So we're at that point today.
Tom, there's a great story about you that I have heard pieces of, about the No Catch 'em Fish Club. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's in my bucket. It's a bucket list item. Once we've handled all of the necessities of finding another means of support for the building, you have to look at the long-term picture of what do we need to help masonry in Grand Rapids. We have very few things that we can do socially in this building that change from what we've always done. Grand River Lodge had an organization called the No Catch 'em Fish Club back in the 40s and 50s. A couple of the old guys told me stories about the No Catch 'em Fish Club, which was an organization that you belonged to. It worked up at Peterson's Lodge up in Baldwin, and once or twice a year, all the members would go up there and they could fish and hunt and spend a weekend, play cards, and just kind of go up there and bond. But if you were caught during the year fishing, they fined you $1 or $2. And then that's how the organization was funded. But when you went up there, they could. They had a big game dinner up there, and they said these guys used to bring stuff out of their freezers, venison, and they'd eat elk and whatever else they had. And Hugo McCrath used to tell us that whatever they hit on the road on the way up also went into the pot. But that organization was disbanded back in the 50s, I believe. My thought at one point, with several other members, that there's a need to have a social club in the building. We used to have a grotto, and several Masonic centers have shrine clubs in them and different things. We had looked at the idea, and it's always been kind of a pipe dream that someday we would have a dinner club up on the 6th floor looking over the city, maybe in the Red Room or something, that you could have where guys could come down and socialize afterwards for specific times and have social events. And the idea came up, and a few of us, Rick Williams and John Dooley and a few of the members had discussed this on several occasions. And we thought about reenacting the No Catch 'em Fish Club and using that as the niche to put a social club up there and call it the No Catch 'em Fish Club. And it would be a separate corporation that would have a liquor license, like a club license, like some of the West Side clubs that I belonged to a couple of those, or an American Legion type club. And with the dining facilities in the building, you could go up and have a dinner club, and it would kind of take some of the heat off from the alcohol concerns that I have in the building, where we're not following the law completely, and we're not completely covered by by insurance because we're not a licensed facility. If you had a club license, and a no catch and fish club would be a good possibility for that, where you could have maybe a deck on the roof where you could go up there, and a no fishing deck where you can't fish off from it, but you could have tables up there and you could sit and watch the fireworks or watch the downtown and take a bait bucket full of ice and beer and take some bait up to the roof and have a no catch and fish club, and you could have a rowboat with a hole in it bolted down to the roof, and men's waders sticking out of the roof or something so it looked like that, and have a sign that said no diving or swimming or what have you. And you could just go up there after lodge, and something when you came down to town at night with your wife to go to a play or a civic theater or an event at the Van Andel, that you could stop at the No Catch and Fish Club. The view would be exceptional. It would be exclusive to the members, and it would be a great place to take friends and prospects into the fraternity and bring them down and show them, how do you belong to that? How do you join this? I ran it through a guy named Fisher, who has put in most of the bars in downtown Grand Rapids and at the Amway. And I told him what we were doing, because I was trying to put a price together as to what it would cost us to build this and put it into play. And the first thing he said after listening to it is, I want to invest in it. I want to be part of it. He said, nobody can compete with that. You've got different clubs around town at the Bob and different areas, but none of them have that niche. You'd have to have a lotto to give tickets to sit on the deck on the roof to watch the fireworks. It would be unique. It would be ours. It would be controlled. It would be certain hours, certain days. We're not trying to put it in as a bar that you can go sit to at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It might be a 6 in the evening till 11, something like that. But and I really wasn't looking at it as an income source, although it could be. It could very easily be a source of income. But I was looking at it more of a source of perpetuating the fraternity to today's young Masons, and a way to bring in new young Masons by an exclusive method of saying, hey, come on, bring your wife, come down, we'll show you. Because when they sit down, the first thing is, what is this place? What goes on in this building? And we all love to take them on a tour.
Yes, we do.
And by the time the tour is done, you've got business people bringing business friends or associates, and that's how the fraternity formed originally. But we've lost that aspect. Today, it's 3 degrees and a regular, and that's, in my opinion, that's in my bucket list. We're not close, but we haven't forgotten it. And at some point, that would develop, and I hope that it could at some point.
Tom, we remodeled the Masonic Lodge Blue Room, which was then the Eastern Star Room, back in 2010. And that took a lot of coordination between the Masonic organizations that were using the room, specifically the Eastern Star, and the lodges. Tell us a little bit about what transpired and how that all came about.
Well, it was owed to us, because when we did the renovation in 1985, the first thing that we sacrificed in the space that was made available to the commercial tenants was the blue room and the red room. The blue room that we had on the first floor, where I was raised and you were raised, was a unique edifice. It was you couldn't compare it to anything else.
That's correct.
We gave that up in an effort to save this facility. We moved into what used to be called the Little Blue Room up on the 6th floor, and we were there until 2010. Through the efforts of you, who headed this process to go out and raise the money to renovate and move down there, which you did an excellent job on.
Thank you.
It was again, it's a joint effort, and you were the one that spearheaded that. But it gave us an opportunity to build something that was unique again. We took a room that was the Eastern Star Room, which was unique, but it was very underutilized. And there really isn't any reason to have several rooms that are vacant on several nights when we can have one room that is adequately equipped for all of us. And that's what we tried to do. Renovated the room so that the Eastern Star can still use it, and it is still their home, and the Masons can still use it for the lodges. but we added a little bit of fluff to it because the room lacked a little bit of the character of the original lodge room. The ceiling was damaged in the fire in 1947, and what we had to do is build a little gingerbread back into it. Something that gives you that wow effect when you walk into it. And you were instrumental in that, working on the team with us to try to find a way to build it. And at that point, we could do basically what we wanted to. And you came to me and said, we need a starry deck canopy. And we would like to have a floor that is parquet with the mosaic tile on it. We could take care of that. And the starry deck canopy was a head scratcher. You know, what the heck do you mean a starry deck canopy? So I got on the internet and I found a few of them in Japan and different places that were very unique. They were fiber optic and they were very expensive. I got some quotes from a California company that would build one for us, and I don't recall exactly, but
it was about
$20,000. And I looked at it and I said, sure, we can do that. It can't be any worse than a boiler, you know. So we built this thing, my maintenance foreman and I, we built this thing out of metal stud and some lightweight mason board that we put on there, masonite, painted it, and then I purchased a couple of kits of these fiber optics. And then we found a website that was kind of unique. You put into the website the date and your coordinates, longitude and latitude, and it gives you a picture of the sky from that point on that night. We went back to the dedication day of the building in November, and we put in the coordinates, and it showed what the sky looked like. So we transferred that format onto this, and we just did it the old-fashioned way with a string and a nail and a pencil, and we put the stars in the locations that they were. The fiber optics came, and it looked like a ball of fishing wire with all different sizes. There was only two sizes of wire, so you had to put in the larger 3 or 4 of them together to make the planets and Polaris and the constellations. So it got to be kind of a fun thing, and we got it done, and the idea was, how are we going to make the clouds show during the day without the stars, and when you illuminate it at night when the lights are down, how do you make the stars come on without showing the clouds? And I used to do taxidermy work as a hobby, so I had a little bit of painting ability, and I painted it out there with just oil paint that you use, that you get in a tube from Duma Art Supply, and painted the clouds, which the clouds kind of, what does a cloud look like is what I said, you know, and well, I'm going to have to study this a little bit. So I went out in my backyard with a lawn chair and a Manhattan, and I looked up at the sky, and the clouds vary. Everyone that comes by is different. And I said, you know, there's no right or wrong. You just got to make it look like a cloud. So after the second or third Manhattan, I got smarter, of course, and I put it all into the memory bank. And when I came down here, I just started painting the clouds on the thing. And the part that they go away when you turn the light on just happened. That wasn't planned. It just happened. But we put all the stars, and there's like 800 different stars, and then I bought another little packet that has blinkies in it. So some of them blink and some of them don't. The constellations are correct with that date. Got this thing all on this 12-foot by 9-foot base, and then said, well, now how are we going to get it up there? We took what is a work platform for us, a crank-up hijacker. We fitted it with 2x6s and made a bed frame type base on it, set the thing on top of it. We put 8 threaded rods out of the top of it, drilled 8 holes in the ceiling, and then we cranked it up, right up through the holes, and up above the ceiling. We came through above the supports, put 2x6s, holes in it with washers, and then we brought it up tight with a ratchet wrench and illuminated the thing, and it's kind of unique. I mean, you don't see too many of them, and when you dim the lights in the room and hit that and they start blinking, for some reason the clouds just disappear and you get the night sky. So it was fun to do. You know, it's not something we'd have spent $20,000 on, but it's unique, and you know, it was a fun project, and you know, that's the thing. Some of these projects, you know, yeah, we can do anything. If it's impossible, it just takes us a little longer, and you know, we just put it together and did it, and it is kind of neat. But that whole room is something to be proud of. We had one of the members of Doric, Nick Klug, did the little paintings for the stations. Being Catholic, it reminds me of Stations of the Cross, but it's all the working tools, and those are hand done. I mean, they're gorgeous, and the room is just. He also did the square and compass that's painted up on the end. And you know, it's something we can all be proud of now. And it was a long time coming, because through this whole process, the Blue Lodges have been very patient working out of the little blue room on the 6th floor, being that they gave up the most when they did the renovation project. So I mean, it was well deserved, and once again now we have a room that's more fitting for masonry in Grand Rapids.
I know when I take people on a tour of the building and we turn those lights on, and I tell them that is the starscape of November of 1915,
Yeah.
their eyes get big.
Yeah.
Where did you get that?
Yeah.
And I remember you and I sitting, as you said, talking about it, and I had these wild ideas, and you said, we'll find a way to do it.
Yeah.
And by gosh, we did. And it is a room certainly we're very proud of. And the projection system that we have up in there is state-of-the-art. The PA system that we have from any point in the room can be heard for the, especially some of the older members that are a little hard of hearing.
Yes.
And then taking those 14-foot solid mahogany built in 1895 benches from the 6th floor down the stairway with about 8 of us on each bench. And we did that on a Saturday afternoon. Had about 30 people from the different lodges showed up,
Yep.
including a former college football player who was about 6'9", about 300 pounds, who I think could have carried one by himself.
Yeah.
But that was a wonderful, wonderful conclusion to the work that we did on that room, and it was fun.
It was.
And poor Jerry, our maintenance foreman, up in the top of the ceiling, where it's still blackened from the fire damage in
Yep.
1947, he came out of there just filthy, but by golly, we got it all done.
It was only half as much fun as moving the furniture from the 1st floor to the 6th floor.
Yeah, I'll bet.
At least this time we were coming downhill. So
Tom, you've utilized a lot of areas of the building for our tenants that normally wouldn't be considered office space or tenant-worthy space. And tell us a little bit about the 7th floor of the building. Most people think we only have 6, but we also have a 7th floor.
yeah, the 7th floor, originally it was the workroom, the workshop for Salden Shrine. This was the director's staff room where they used to have table saws, and they built the props and scenery for the shrine. Some of it was used at the circus and for the initiations, the hot sands. Been vacant for a long time. It's not serviced by the elevator, so it's kind of an empty floor. Back several years ago, I was using it for storage. We put a lift in over here by the stairs, and we were using it for storage up here and leasing those areas out. And then I came across a tenant, which is the Film Farm, which was a group that was over on Wealthy Street that takes old films, restores them, and sells them and repairs them. And they do also video. They're doing this video here today. And they've been up here for, I don't know, 3 years now. They utilized half of the floor up here, and now they just expanded into the whole floor. So the whole 7th floor is being used by a commercial tenant. It's a little off-the-wall type of use. It's a great marriage between the two. Part of this area is storage. Part of it is mechanical for the machines that he has that repair these old films. But it has worked very well for us. We also took the old blue room on the 6th floor, and now that's a dance studio. So some of the areas of the building, if it isn't occupied, we've leased every little nook and cranny that we possibly could out. And it has worked very well. So we are utilizing the entire building today, even the 7th floor that doesn't exist.
As we enter the second 100 years of this wonderful building that we have, what are some of the biggest challenges you think we're going to face in the building that we now call the Grand Rapids Masonic Center?
Wow, that's a very good question. I wish I knew. Probably the biggest concern that I have in the future is how are we going to continue to stay 80 or 90 or 97%, whatever it is, occupied. Because of who we are and how we function as a Masonic fraternity that now is completely dependent upon the commercial aspects of the building to survive. What do we do in the future is we have to find a way to continue that, and we have to reinvent yourself every year. You just can't keep doing the same thing year after year and stay 98 or 97% occupied. So that's always a challenge, to continue to find ways to do it and to continue to invest. That's a very important thing, that we continue to invest funds into those commercial areas to keep them top shelf. You know, an example is a Hilton hotel. You go to a Hilton hotel, I don't care if it's 100 years old or 3 years old, you expect the same quality in every one of them because they continue to upgrade, and that's one of their signatures. Has to be one of ours if we're going to continue in the future as well. We have to keep this as a top-notch facility. When the money stops coming in and we stop putting investments in it, that's when it gets risky for us.
Tom, on behalf of all the Masonic organizations and our tenants, I want to thank you for all the hard work you have done to keep our building solid and strong. Also, thank you for 40 years of dedication to the Masonic organizations and to the Masonic Center building in particular. But to not only just to them, but to all the people who use this building on a daily basis, knowing that they come into a safe building, a clean building, an attractive building, and one that they can be very proud to be part of. And it's much, much appreciation, because without your efforts, none of that story would have ever happened.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mike. I do appreciate the comments, but it's a team event. This is not Tom Vankampen's building. I mean, I treat it like my own. I don't just work here, I live here. This is my life. It's been my life for 40 years. But you don't do it by yourself. The MTA has been supportive through every step of the way, or it would have never happened. There's no way a property manager could have made this happen the way it was without that support. My staff is everything to me. Without the staff, we're nothing. That's our product. That's what we have to preserve. That's what we have to maintain if we're going to stay where we are. And it's been a pleasure. I mean, it's been a journey. I get bored easily. And when things are going right for an extended amount of time, that's a problem. We got to break something. Something has to. Where's the fire? You know, we have to find something that's squeaking, smoking, or going. Otherwise, we become stagnant. And so far, this has not happened. It's 39 plus years, but it really only seems like 38. So it happens too fast. I'm approaching a time where in my life I may make a change, I may not. Every day, you just don't know. But it has been a pleasure here the entire time. Thank you.
We've been visiting with Tom Vankampen, building manager of the Grand Rapids Masonic Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Thank you for joining us today.